confusion.
Okay, who's that?
Somebody with Joe on the
Pat Tompkins is on the phone with Joe. Sorry,
Okay.
Kevin, it's Gail. Pat,
Okay.
I think, was having trouble letting people in. So I think you have the two most non-technical people trying to figure it out.
All right, I'm going to go back to the phone with him then.
And you can tell him I said that. My parking spot will not be plowed for the next snowstorm.
You can blame me because I just attempted to join the meeting as an audience member.
You broke Zoom. It was just a matter of time, Bob.
Yeah, I tried to join as audience, but suddenly I became Oz.
Hi, everyone.
All right. Hey, Carla. Good evening, Mr. Geenap.
Good evening.
So Gail, just for the record, I heard you describe Jeff and I as the least technical people in the room.
That was meant for Joe because I can only imagine him sweating in his office going, just click the button.
Yeah, we've had this, that's two months in a row, we've had this issue with getting the meeting started. But anyway, welcome to the meeting. We've got, we're still waiting for a couple building committee members to join. So let me see. So I think we have everyone from the building committee is here. We got John, Nancy, Greg, Mike, and Kirk. I think Brad is missing. We will give him a minute. But we have a quorum, so if we just give him a couple minutes to see if he shows up. All right, so I'm not sure if Brad Conan's going to be joining us tonight, but we do have a quorum, so we're going to call the meeting of the Public Building Committee to order. Chuck, do you want to call
Yeah.
the of the school committee to order. Do you have a quorum? Do you need to do that?
Yeah, yes, thank you, Pat. Aaron,
Here.
Carla,
Here.
Sean,
Here.
John,
Here.
Tom,
Here.
and I'm here. Before you start, Pat, thank you for inviting us tonight. I guess the way I think we see it going is Dale from GNAP will do a presentation, and then Dr. Doherty will follow that with a timeline on the process. And I think that's what you were looking for. So
Yeah, that'd be great. And the first thing on the agenda is approval of the last month's meeting minutes, but I'm just gonna skip. We can circle back to that, Chuck.
that's up to you. We're fine either way.
Yeah, we're fine doing that. So, and yeah, we're obviously interested in an update. A couple of us watched the meeting, the school committee meeting in November. So we got a preview of this presentation. So we're definitely interested in update. One of the big questions on our mind is when as this project moves forward, when it's something that should be formally, when does a project become a project for purposes of the PBC, which is
Sure.
something we're still working through. But why don't you go ahead and you can start.
Okay. I saw Dale somewhere here on my.
I know what
There
on
you
some,
are.
on some computers you can rearrange people so that you can keep track of them, and some you can't. So as many of these things as we do, there's always a bit of a delay in trying to get the share screen thing going here. So let me do this. So do you have a single slide showing on your screen there? Yes, we're good.
Yes, we
Okay,
do.
so I'll walk through, probably relatively quickly, just what we went through in terms of doing, the overall study, and happy to back up and fill in details. Overall, the key thing is to look at what the enrollment projections are, because of course space needs is the key thing. There's actually two things that factor into that, is space needs and then changes in educational program. To look at what different options would be for the town for evaluation. When we do planning studies, we always think about looking for a solution that thinks forward 50 or even 100 years in terms of establishing facilities and locations, but you really look at building things that have a pretty definitive need within the next 20 years. If it's beyond that, typically for planning, you would not, build facilities that are not going to be put to use sooner than that. The enrollment, it's seemingly modest increases that you have, but overall, when you look at the number of students, it's still, as the school department has faced, if you have kids coming, you have to have a place to put them. The enrollment projections were done by NESDEC, the New England School Development Council. They're a local agency, actually private company, it's not an agency, that does enrollment projections. Most of you have probably heard of them. They pretty much do the enrollment projections for most of the Commonwealth and beyond. The growth is around a little over 100 students over the next 10 years. Most of that is geographically north-south in town at the Killam and Birch Meadow areas, a little bit less at the southern area, and then in Wood End, that district really has sort of statistically negligible in growth of about 3 students. We'll look at it just a little bit. The backgrounds and assumptions that we did when we looked through the schools. So first of all, just as a baseline, the 5 sites, and for reference, the districts as those lay out. I think you can probably read those and know where they are. And again, the enrollment growth The bulk of it is through this area, the Killam being the largest, very little at north end, and then a little bit less to the south. The enrollment numbers, as I've said now a few times, are larger at Birch and Killam. A small amount at Wood End, a little bit more at the other two, around 10 students for about 115. So not a seemingly huge number, but nonetheless at 18 or 20 students per classroom, that still is a 5 or 6 classroom need that you really don't have a place for now. Equally as important is the changes in program standards. And to give you an idea, the MSBA standard, published standard at this time for elementary schools is around 160 square feet, or is 160 square feet per student. But actually almost all elementary schools that are submitted to MSBA over the past 5 years and current are around 190 square feet per student. And that reflects the changes in the program that has happened, not only special needs, but just additional computers, other things that are available. So you can see, if you kind of take that across your current students, is around 42,000 square feet, which is basically a whole school. Now I want to emphasize, if you'd undertake a project, you're not required, and in fact would not go to all of the schools. It wouldn't be a requirement to go adjust all of them accordingly to that standard. And no community does that. It's sort of just as you have now, schools that range from 127 to 190 square feet. Over time, as you renovate schools or build new schools, those areas increase. But it gives you a sense of why the school district has a hard time fitting all the things they're trying to do in the existing buildings. Just again, to give you that sort of range, you have a low of Birch at 127. So all of those average currently at 137. That excludes Wood End because it's such an outlier in terms of your overall area. If you factor that in, you have it averages 146, which is not really that meaningful a number. It gives you an idea, though, how you look at the math. For pre-kindergarten, you have currently 110 students. Currently, the bulk of that is, at the high school. Since it is not a mandated program, it's somewhat elective that the town can manage. We looked at both, larger and smaller, but for planning purposes, we looked at projecting the growth to 175 total over the next 10 years. And that could be adjusted by the town. Obviously, proportionally, that's far greater than any of the other grades. When we looked at existing conditions, and this is not a condition assessment. Your buildings are generally in very good shape. You do a good job taking care of them. But in terms of what the capacity of the schools are, and to give you just a quick sense of it, the Killam School, the orange here shows that if you adjusted it to have the 190 square feet, actually, I'm sorry, the 160 square feet, so the standard, not the larger, this is not a design. This is just sort of, a figure ground thing. So the yellow reflects the space that would be needed for the projected enrollment at that school, and the orange would be the makeup for space. If you renovated any particular school, you would attempt to bring it up to the standards. But again, you would not go back and do it at all the schools, because you can't do it by just adding a small block of space somewhere. It ripples through all of the classrooms, the core facilities, etc. At Birch Meadow, you get a similar look. Again, the yellow is just for enrollment to give you sort of a massing idea. At Wood End is tiny with 3 students. At Barrows, you can see, again, it's a small amount for the enrollment, the orange making up the space. And at Josh Eaton is similar to Barrows. So again, just a kind of quick understanding in terms of mass. When we looked at the planning options, we took a few things into consideration. The current districts, the cycle of building renovations that has been done over the past, but that's not, you know, a real driving force. And then the awareness of the middle school districting. That's important in that if a group of students are together at an elementary school, you know, have their social circles, et cetera, when they move on to middle school, did I say that right? If they're together in an elementary school, you'd like them to all move on to the same middle school. So that can become one of the issues with thinking through redistricting. Other constraints, wood end is sort of difficult to expand on. Physically, it seems like there's a fair amount of site. This is largely a very steep grade and a deep hole of wetlands, which is not particularly usable. On the north, there is some area, there's ledge, etc. Also, as you probably know, there's classrooms on this end of the building. This is the library and the auditorium, or not auditorium, but the gymnasium on the other end. So putting a few classrooms here is not particularly practical, but the bigger impediment on this site is site access. There is a drive entrance that goes all the way through, and as you're probably aware, all access in and out is done on this end because there are sort of limitations in the road network to the north of the site. But it was considered and put on the table as a possibility. And again, this is the only one that has the sort of spaciousness, if you will, that most other schools have. The Eaton School is not particularly practical to expand because of site limitations. And largely it's, you know, there is a certain probably aesthetic desire to keep a front area because of the original historic, but more importantly is this pinch point of the site that to do significant increased use here, it's hard to get traffic in and out, accesses, classrooms to connect to things. Again, a possibility, but it's not, you know, an immediate easy thing to do. The same with Barrows. Partly there's the wetlands to the back, the steep grade over here, and with much expansion in this area, then you get into difficulties with the play field. And again, it's somewhat of a neighborhood issue with the amount of traffic that's in the middle of the neighborhood, which is where elementary schools like to be. We looked at many schemes and we started with some basic assumptions. One is that ideally the pre-K at the high school would be addressed. It works well where it is now. It doesn't offer a lot of options for expansion and remaining at the high school. And your particular arrangement actually isn't too bad, but in theory, you wouldn't necessarily want the pre-K at the high school site. Modular classrooms are serving a very useful purpose for you right now. In long-term planning, modulars are not considered as, you know, part of the permanent solution. And to kind of put in perspective, as you know from doing them, they are not eligible for reimbursement from the MSBA program. We assumed that redistricting at some level at least would be acceptable. And as you know, that happens from time to time. We started with an assumption that it would be ideal to reduce the number of schools, possibly for cost savings, but also since Reading does not have other, you know, available sites for other town purposes. I will tell you, we did go through that exercise. There really was not a planning option that was advantageous for that because none of the sites are really large enough. Plus the distribution. So that did not turn out to be something that was pursued very far. And then again, what we just show is these shades are just, they're not designs, but really just showing an area. Cost, we have looked at the cost. We really generated this during 2019 and carried a significant amount of inflation, which sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, I'll say, because it did kind of prove out MSBA are seeing those significant increases this year. And in fact, bidding is somewhat, is changing, but it's definitely going up. So the numbers we talk about now really have still hold true in 2020. I don't think I mentioned in terms of the enrollment and other aspects of the study, The majority of this was done before COVID, but we have talked with NESDEC and we've looked at your own town's enrollment numbers as well as other MSBA projects. And essentially the study is not altered in any way because of the COVID situation. At this point, there's no known changes that are going to be long-term, and school projects seem to essentially be continuing as they were, assuming pre-COVID conditions will largely return. Whether that holds 100% true to enrollment, we could probably have a interesting discussion. The initial finding, we did consider, obviously the quick thing is to put an addition on each of the buildings to accommodate that growth. And as you saw, with Wood End being very small and the other schools being at only 8 or 10 students, that's really not a practical. And if you started doing those, it becomes a very basically unaffordable, not a very frugal approach to it. There is also the issue of MSBA reimbursement, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Structurally, we did look at, it's not really feasible to add an additional floor to the other schools. Programmatically, that becomes difficult, but with changing codes and so on, there did not seem to be any of the buildings that would really accept that as a practical solution, particularly in light of having to occupy the school while you would be doing that addition to the building, because you don't really have swing space to say move kids out, vacate a school, and do an additional floor. We did also consider whether it was practical to just move the students, the 5th grade, into the middle schools, and that does not play out well. We did, by the way, look at the space of the middle schools and the enrollment projections and sort of some quick program analysis, and the growth that you have coming through the elementary schools does not translate to a project next at the middle schools and the high school. There is adequate space in those facilities to accommodate this amount of growth that we're looking at. Each of the schools do require, core and programmatic space, and the additional classrooms, there are 10 classrooms and 8 classrooms at Parker and Coolidge that sort of play into that basic analysis. The 2 schemes we came to are actually quite similar. And again, we went through 10 or 12 options. It was like A through G plus some sub options. But the 2 that I wanted to show you tonight can answer questions about the other is, first of all, basically a 660 student school at the Killam site to replace Killam and to accept basically through redistricting the enrollment growth at the other schools. Now, it doesn't mean these arrows indicating here that you would necessarily move specifically some students from Killam, say, or from Barrows to Killam, but in some way the districts would make that massage. Now, it is to understand this is a bigger school than you currently have. Most of your schools now are around 400. So this at 660, and again, that provides for some, additional space for growth. You would, lost my train of thought. So the overall project estimated construction costs around 52 million, and total project cost, which is really the more meaning, is around $69 million. Now, it is important to note that although the goal was to address the pre-K, that this does not provide a solution for the pre-K. It would remain at the high school, and there's not a specific plan for future location of that. This does not include the requirement to continue to use the modulars. So that would be available for other purposes and does not factor into the long-term use. In order to adopt or to include the entire pre-K, we came up with a solution to add a small addition to Birch Meadow. Again, between the location and the site constraints, it really seemed to do a new school at Killam, and then do a second project at Birch Meadow. This has an overall higher cost roughly $66 million between the two projects, and an $86 million total project cost. Now, and sort of in thinking about the timeline and funding, because MSBA will only fund one project at a time with a community, presumably you would do the Killam project with a long-term future plan for the Birch Meadow project, or the town would decide to do that essentially on its own. But so the dollar values in terms of funding remain pretty much the same. There is this question about why, both options have the Killam site. It's really that it just is the most, the best candidate for development. It has a little more area, it's very buildable, it's flat. It would mean replacing the play field, but it is a largely buildable site. It will be difficult, but appears you could manage to continue to use the Killam while a new building was constructed behind it, or at least in phases. It does address the largest enrollment, although that is not the most compelling factor. It is the only school on the east side of town, if you will. And so the location, that central location, does play into it. And I mentioned that it's the only school that has not been renovated, although, again, that has not really been the significant factor driving the planning options, because although the others have been rented, when you get forward 20 years and look back, that won't be a significant factor. It's more what is the better long-term plan. So I'd be happy to come back and answer questions. Well, I guess just as a kind of quick, we did look at the rental space, whether that's an option, and because of funding, availability, etc., it's really not a possibility. You cannot solve your problem exclusively by redistricting. That's one thing that you always want to look at, because you do essentially have a space shortfall at all of the buildings without considering significant enrollment. There's really not space to do that. Again, not really practical to build at all of the sites to avoid a larger project. And then we did look at, possibly, is there anywhere we could do one project, say Killam or another site, to just do one project to include the pre-K, and it just seems that would be really overtaxing that site. It would be around 770 students at, say, in any one site, for instance, Killam, and it really wouldn't probably be able to handle that much. There is also a little bit of a magical thing with elementary schools at around 650 students. That's sort of the break point where one gymnasium, one normal sized cafeteria, essentially one library, all of the core facilities that one of those core facilities can handle a school of that size. Typically, if a school gets over those sort of enrollments, they tend to be split into two and try to function a little bit like two schools. So for that reason, we think it would be difficult with separate entrances and so on to use Killam for something larger. And with that, I'll pass it over to Dr. Doherty to talk about the MSBA timeline, or I can try to field questions now, however you'd like to do that.
Pat, I don't know if you want me to move on, or if you want there to be questions at this point.
I think it might make sense to break if anyone has anyone on the building committee has any questions. I know I had a couple. So if that's okay, John, unless you want.
Oh, no, it's fine. It's absolutely fine.
Okay, yeah, while it's fresh in people's minds. So I had a couple of questions, Dale.
Yep.
Let me see. Some comments and some questions. One comment I had was on the Barrows and the Barrows and Josh Eaton sites. If you could go back to the to the sort of the layouts. This is more of a commentary, but I think those sites were dismissed because of the site. I would sort of challenge that I can think of a couple other reasons those sites aren't a great spot for an addition
Mhm.
or for a new school. But if you look at one of those footprints, you know, if you come to the conclusion that you're going to build a new school next to an existing school, then both of those sites could be managed that way. I can think of a couple other reasons that you noted, the enrollment and the, you know, the current state of the facilities that makes Killam lend itself more to that.
Mhm.
But you could sort of build next to another one. Just a commentary on that. Another thing, if you could explain a little bit, you had talked about dollars per square foot. Or not dollars per square foot per student, and you use
Sure.
a number of 160 and 190. Can
Mhm.
you just take a minute to explain those two numbers in a little more detail to us?
Sure. So essentially, when MSBA participates in doing a school, and I'm telling you things most of you are aware of, you know, it's a requirement that, you know, you don't build a way big gym and not have proper library, et cetera. So that ripples through the school. So there are certain standards for classrooms and, you know, gymnasium, arts, et cetera, by student population enrollment. And if you sort of add all of those up, you get to essentially a standard of 160 square feet per student. So they're, you know, let's say very space frugal planning. If you just provided the bare minimum facilities, essentially it takes at least 160 square feet per student to build an adequate educational facility. And then there are bonuses that, if you will, for reimbursement, that you can do certain community uses. A common one is such as the library being used for community purposes, that and additional, well, it used to be translated to computers, but technology. There are bonuses that you can get to add additional space to accommodate your academic program, but also within reason, a town can elect to do things as they wish. And as we have seen, or, you know, all of the submissions that have come into MSBA really over, I think really the last 5 years, elementary schools almost always tend to run around 190 square feet per student. So quite a bit, you know, I mean, that's 30 out of 160, you know, 20% larger than the minimum standard. So I think if you, you know, the message I'm trying to make is, if you started to do a new elementary school or a major renovation to a school, when you went through the programmatic analysis, you would probably end up at that 190 square feet, or virtually every other community does.
Okay, so if I could just kind of reiterate what I took away from that.
Mhm.
The MSBA standard is 160, but what we're seeing other communities in elementary schools that are being built, they tend to be running around 190.
Correct. And
So
and-
in your, I'm sorry, go ahead.
well, I was just going to, and just footnote that, is that your most recent school, Wood End, that's what it is also. So
Yeah.
it just gives you a sense of where that is.
Right. Yeah, Wood End has a lot of common space.
It does. Yeah.
A follow-up to that. So the cost that you used, did you use, so on your analysis of cost on this, you're basing this on an estimate of a 660 student school that would be at about 190 square foot per student, or 125,000 square foot school.
Correct.
Correct. So that size school would be very large compared to the other schools. And I know you mentioned that on an enrollment basis, but just for comparison on a square foot basis, the current 5 elementary schools, you've got it in there. I think it's 54, 59, 56, 52,
Yes.
and 57,000 square feet. So this would be twice as big as any other elementary school. During the process, was that discussed? Did anyone feel like there were any adverse effects from that?
Well, I don't, I'll let Dr. Doherty weigh in as well. We did discuss it, obviously. there was a lot more consideration about, the enrollment versus necessarily the area. And again, Reading needs to do what is appropriate for Reading. We are actually seeing 700, 800, and 900 student elementary schools. Now, I'm not here advocating that, but just to make the point that it is happening, and it will probably tie into some of the other discussion. Not so much that people desire it in and of itself, but because many towns like Reading does not have unused sites. So it's not a matter of doing an additional school, for instance, or necessarily room to, spread this across, say, 3 building addition project. So it is a question, it is a concern, but we do see it happening a great deal.
Okay.
I can add a little bit to that too, Pat. I mean, when we were going through this process, that certainly did come up. There are some advantages to having a building a little bit bigger. One is economy of scale. You're able to do a little bit more with your staffing needs and making sure you can maximize your staffing. The other piece, and a lot of time was spent on the programmatic piece, particularly with special education. I know that Dr. Stites and her team were part of the we were going through the study as well, is that we are going to need additional spacing for special education programs as we move forward. We've expanded over the last several years from a 1 in-district program to now we're up to 9 or 10. So clearly we're going to need that space. The one thing that Killam would need, or the bigger building, it would need additional administrative support, because 1 building principal would not be able to supervise all of the staff for that building. So they would need an assistant principal at Killam compared to the other schools.
Okay. Thank you. So keep going through. I've developed a little list of questions here, so I'll keep running through. The dollars for Scheme A, are those that you listed, the 52 million construction costs and the 69 million total? Are those in today's dollars? I think you said they were today's dollars, not escalated.
Well, we generated them, really, it was the end of 2019, early 20, and we did escalate them. But they do translate. I went back and I think we have a total project cost that it comes out to, the number you mentioned, square footage, was a little bit high, but we have about $650 a square foot total project cost. Okay. which by the way, for people 9 months ago, everyone would have said was a little bit high, but that's about what they are trending now, which is kind of phenomenal. But
yeah. So a little bit of good news on that front. There was a 125,000 square foot elementary school in Springfield that was bid about a month or 2 ago. That was about 45 million or $350 a square foot. So the numbers are not, they don't seem unrealistic at all. If anything, there might be an opportunity for those numbers to get better.
That was construction cost. Yeah.
Right. That's just construction
not
cost,
total project cost. Yeah.
Not total project cost, which is the smaller number.
Yep.
Next question. You had mentioned the possibly some redistricting, and you also touched on the desire for elementary school students to go to to go to the same middle school. And I think right now we have, might be Killam, I'm not that versed, but we do have 1 elementary school where some of the kids split into 2 middle schools. With them, has any thought been given that if there will be a little bit of redistricting required with this scheme, would that solve that problem, make it better, make it worse, or we just haven't got that far?
Well, we know there would have to be some redistricting. I'll defer to Dr. Doherty, but I'd say we're not far enough to have determined if it could be 100% to keep them together.
Yeah, that's correct. Fortunately, both of our middle schools are built for equal size, so we could do some moving around if we need to. But that would be the next step in the process once we determine what the the size buildings would be and which would go to each middle school.
Okay. Last question, at least last question from me. Does this plan assume that when you're done, the modulars that are in place now remain in place, or would they go away? Or not 100% determined yet?
Well, they wouldn't factor into sort of the usable, if you will, the usable education in terms of the K-5. So whether they're used for another town use or some additional, you know, I guess essentially the answer is it's not determined, or if some pre-K continued or whatever. But they wouldn't be needed for the core program, I'll put it that way. And what happened with them has not been determined.
Right, okay, all right. I think that's the questions I had on that. Is there anyone else on the building committee that has any questions?
Pat, you touched on all the questions I had, so I don't know if there's anybody else, but I'm good.
Going once, going twice. John, you're up on the timeline.
Okay. And Dale has promised that if there's anything that I say that's not accurate, he will let me know. So what we want to talk a little bit about is the next steps, and the next steps could begin in 2021, or that could be deferred until a later date. But what we felt would be important, because I know the question has been asked a few times, is what would this look like if we were to move forward with some sort of option? One of the things that's important to note is that the statement of interest, which would be the first step in the process, does not bind you into an option. What it does is it gets you through that first step in the process, and the work that Dale has done for us up to this point would be the data that we would need to submit a statement of interest. So there are 8 modulars that are part of the MSBA process. This is the first modular, which is the eligibility period, and it begins with submitting a statement of interest. And I'm going to go through a little bit of each of these. So during this eligibility period is once you submit that statement of interest is when MSBA would review your statement of interest to determine if you would be accepted into the eligibility part of the program. So I said there's 8 modulars. The first one is the eligibility period, and then that's the preparation piece, followed by the scope determination, which includes both the feasibility study and the schematic design and securing the funding for the project. And then the last piece, which is the scope monitoring, which is when you go through the detailed design, the construction, completing the project phases of it. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go through what would this look like on a timeline. So just so you know where MSBA is at right now, and the pandemic has slowed them down a little bit. February 2021 is when they're going to be addressing projects in which the statement of interest was submitted last April in 2020. So they are a little bit behind due to the pandemic. Conversely, projects that were submitted in 2019 are completing the scope definition phase. Projects completing the design portion of the scope monitoring were submitted in 2017 and 18. And as I said, some of the timelines moving forward may also be delayed because of the pandemic. So this is where currently MSBA is in their process for projects that have already in the pipeline. This is the timeline that Dale has showed us in some previous presentations and the amount of time that would take. There are some overlaps in this timeline, but as you're going to see, as we move forward on this, it's going to take somewhere between 3.5 to 5 years from beginning to end for this timeline to take effect. And a lot of this is going to depend on the MSBA approval process, obviously the town funding process as well. These are all going to be factors in the timeline. So if the statement of interest was submitted in 2021, what one possible approach is that from February to April 2021, the school committee would get community feedback on the different options and votes on an option solely for the statement of interest. As I mentioned, that does not bind you to an option, but it allows you to submit a statement of interest. Where you're going to get more specific is on the options is later on in the process with the feasibility study. So the statement of interest would be filed around April 2021. That was last year's due date. It's possible that that due date could get moved further into May or June, or even later. In the summer of 2021, once all of them are reviewed, the MSBA would invite Reading into the process if they accept the statement of interest. And as I said earlier, the work that has already been done by GNAP would suffice for us to be able to take this first step. If Reading is invited, the 270-day piece, there would be an initial compliance certification. The school building committee forms, and I'll explain that in a minute because there are specific requirements by MSBA on the membership of the school building committee. There is an educational profile questionnaire that's done, a maintenance plan that is submitted, an enrollment study, the commitment of community funding for the feasibility study, and then the last piece would be the execution of the MSBA feasibility study agreement. This is the first piece, and this is about a 270-day process, although it could take fewer days, which MSBA has no problem inviting someone in earlier than that. If you are going to look to secure funding for the feasibility and the schematic, one possible option is the November town meeting, which the warrant closes October 21st, 2021. And then November 8th would be the first session of town meeting. So sometime during November town meeting would be when this vote would be taken. And I'm going to get into a minute what the cost of that would be. So the school building committee membership is specified as part of the requirements. And you need the following people on the school building committee for MSBA to accept them as a school building committee membership. You need someone who is MCPPO certified. The chief financial officer would be a part of it, the town manager, a minimum of one school committee member, the superintendent of schools, the director of facilities, the representative of the office authorized by law to construct school buildings, the school principal. In this case, if one of the options was approved, it would be the Killam principal or the Birch Meadow principal, depending on what direction. Members knowledgeable in the educational mission and function of a facility, a local budget official or member of the local finance committee, members of the community with architecture, engineering, and/or construction experience. This would be permanent building committee members, and then other people as deemed important to that group. There would be a chair of the school building committee. Not everyone would have voting power, so you would need to identify who would have voting power. And all of this would need to be addressed and certified to MSBA by the local authority. So then you enter phase 2, assuming that everything has moved forward according to plan. The MSBA would invite Reading into the feasibility study phase in December of 2021. And then in January to May 2022, assuming the town meeting did vote to approve the funding, there would be the procurement process and request for services for the feasibility study and the schematic design, which would include a selection of the owner's project manager and the selection of the designer. This now brings us to phase 3, which is the actual feasibility study. So this process would take a little less than a year. This is when the different options would be reviewed, the educational program, the space summary, documenting existing conditions, pretty much a more drilled down level from the study that GNAP did for us this past year. Developing and evaluating alternatives, and then recommending the most cost-effective and educationally appropriate design to MSBA. This is where the final option would be vetted out and voted on to be moved forward. Then it enters phase 4, which is the schematic design. So once an option has been determined, this is when you drill down and you get very detailed to establish the scope, budget, and schedule for the proposed project. You take a look at, and then this is forwarded to the MSBA Board of Directors for their consideration. And then the MSBA Board of Directors would be required to approve this before the district would be able to enter into a project scope and budget agreement and project funding agreement with the district. Then phase 5 would be the funding of the project, and this would be to fund the remaining amount minus the feasibility study and schematic design. The timeline could be November of 2023, where you would need both town meeting approval and there would need to be a debt exclusion override election. And then if both are successful, the final design would begin. And then this would enter phase 6 and 7 of the final design, and then construction, which is phase 8. So you can see the final design would go from November 2023 to July 2024. You'd go through your bid process, which takes you to October 2024. Construction would be about a year and a half, and then the school building would be ready to open in September of 2026. Again, this is an estimated timeline. It's based on a lot of different factors, but this is a realistic timeline if all of the different steps were approved along the way. So the funding, and if we took scheme A as an example, modules 1, 2, 3, and 4, which would include your feasibility study and schematic design, would be about $1.7 million, which is, I believe, Dale, 2.5 to 3.5% of the cost, I believe, is how that's calculated.
Yes. So
And
that's,
then module 5, 6, 7, 8, which would be the bulk of the project and the construction, that's $67 million. And then the final point, which I think Dale brought up as well, if the choice is to construct Killam and later do Birch Meadow, which is option B, you couldn't submit the Birch Meadow to MSBA as an SOI until Killam completed construction. So if you follow the timeline that I just explained and extend that to include Birch Meadow, you would submit following a similar process with MSBA for Birch Meadow in January 2027, leading to a completed construction in 2030 or 2031 for Birch Meadow. Most likely that construction would happen without reimbursement. So that's what the timeline would look like, or an estimated timeline.
Okay. Thank you, John. One quick question, if you could, and I know you covered this, but you went through it pretty quickly.
Oh,
If
sorry.
you could kind of hone in on the town votes. So the first vote and I know it's important as you go through the MSBA process to demonstrate to them that you have town support for the project. You know, in short, they don't like to go through the whole process, get to the end and have a town vote a project down.
Yes.
So maybe you could just kind of hone in again. I know you covered it, but you aren't going fast. You're going at a fine speed, but I kind of missed exactly like when the first vote and the second vote would be.
I think,
So
John,
here's- yeah, go ahead.
sorry, it might be your slide 14, I think is maybe the, well, or whichever way. Yeah, this works too, I guess, whichever way you want.
This is
So
the first
this,
one.
yeah, so you could go as early as, assuming that the letter of interest is submitted, so the statement of interest is submitted in 2021, you could go as early as November town meeting for requests for funding for feasibility and schematic.
Which would be the 1.7 million. plus
Correct.
or minus.
Correct.
Okay.
And then the funding for the project would be approximately 2 years later,
Okay.
November 2023.
Okay.
Did that address it, Pat?
Yeah, no, that answered the question. Perfectly. Is there anyone else on the building committee that has any questions for John or Dale? Nancy?
No, I'm all set. I guess what I'm hearing is that if that first sort of option A or AB is decided, that doesn't necessarily mean that's the actual design approach. Is that correct? That's just to get you to the first phase of decision making by the building MSBC, whatever it is. Yeah. Is that correct?
That is correct. You don't have to make a decision till the end of the feasibility study.
Gotcha. Good. Okay. Thanks.
Pat, can I ask a question?
Sure.
I know it's Chuck.
Yes, Chuck, you can.
It's something that I have been thinking about since Dale had presented to us. On the option where we're including, or we have what we're calling now 2 projects, Killam and Birch Meadow, is there, I'm assuming you vetted a lot of ways to maybe call that one project so that we don't have to go get approval on 2 projects? There's no way to tie in those 2 together and call them one?
No, they absolutely take it. Separate sites are separate projects for them.
Okay.
But sort of a follow-up question to that, and John, the last statement in your last slide, I think said that you assumed there wouldn't be reimbursement for Birch Meadow.
No, what I meant is that you would most likely have to move forward with the construction if you want to keep that timeline before you got the reimbursement
Okay,
or approved for the reimbursement.
got it. But
So-
but if scheme B, it was B, was the choice, one avenue could be to submit the new Killam School through the MSBA for reimbursement while simultaneously pursuing the Birch Meadow addition, but you wouldn't be able to run that through MSBA and gain reimbursement.
Assuming, assuming the town would accept that, you could, sure.
Okay.
As a question too, it sounds to me as well that having one large project stands a much better chance of getting approval by
I
MS.
agree.
Is that correct? So that's why we're looking at a sort of a double-sized school from what we have currently. I guess I'm a little worried about that just in terms of management, but I can see the pros and cons of why you want to do this. It from a reimbursement standpoint, it's certainly much cleaner and much easier to get that money up front sooner. Just be good to, when you get to the feasibility part of it, to really do a nice final review to make sure that truly is the best option for the school district in total.
Hey, Pat, I just had one other question I've been thinking about again since the last meeting, and I don't know who would, maybe this is for Dale or maybe Bob, a little less sure. So the funding for the feasibility is kind of done in advance of when we would go to MSBA. So that's kind of initially a sunk cost if we end up not getting reimbursement or the project doesn't happen or something. If it does continue, can that money eventually be rolled into the debt exclusion, or does it just stay as something that we paid for up front?
No, the amount funding the feasibility study through schematic design is considered part of the total project cost for reimbursement. It does later fold into the project.
Okay, and so
Yes.
so what would happen? We would just that money would go back into free cash or something. That portion of what we get from the reimbursement.
I can
yeah.
take a stab at that.
Yeah.
Things are a lot different than when the high school was built from how the MSBA operates. If you separate the construction of money from
Anybody else listen, Bob?
Bob, I'm having trouble hearing you. I don't know if anyone else on the call can hear you, but you were definitely all garbled.
Oh, okay. If you separate the construction from the money part, you spend money as you do. MSBA is going to cut you a lump sum check when they approve you. So it used to be that they wanted to pay your debt service. Now they will just say, here's the cash, and it's up to the town accountant to figure out how to offset the existing debt exclusion with revenue. So you could be 3 years into a 10-year debt service until you get any reimbursement. And effectively, this is how we did the library. The first 3 years is all on the taxpayers, and the next 7 years is less on the taxpayers to make up for that, if that helps.
Thank you, Bob.
John, I had one other question on the timeline. If you can go back to the school building committee, and just see if we can hone in on a time frame for that. And just to give some background, I think our bylaw states that if we're in charge of a project, there will be at least one, maybe two members of whatever board. You know, in the event we were building a library, there'd be two members of the library board of trustees as temporary members of the permanent building committee. But this would be a different building committee altogether. So it's kind of at odds. Obviously, we would have to defer to the MSBA requirements because we would want to get reimbursed for the school. So just wondering when that committee needs to come into play, and also thinking aloud, just as more conversation for members of the building committee. We have an application process for that we developed for new projects that come up, and something we should think about. I don't know if that application process would apply to this project and how it would be managed. It wouldn't necessarily be a permanent building committee project. It would be a town project with members of the permanent building committee on the school building committee. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, John or Bob. And John, you kind of highlight in my original question was, you know, approximately when we'd have to develop that.
So, and Dale, please pipe in at any time, because I know that you've done you've gone through this process. Right here on modular 1 is when the school building committee is formed.
Okay.
But this is, I think, more in the charter or the bylaws on how it was set up. I believe you can have non-voting members on the permanent building committee. So the permanent building committee could still be the voting group, but it would have all these other people as part of the process, and they would be on the school building committee. So the permanent building committee would be still leading it, but it would be part of an overall school building committee that would have all of these components. Because in the application, it specifies who is a voting member and who's not a voting member. It doesn't specify. That's the way I would take it, but I don't know, Bob, if you.
Yeah, that's the way when we were discussing how to set up the PBC and how to set up the bylaw, that's exactly how the discussion went at the time, and I assume MSBA's rules aren't much different, was that the MSBA would recognize a voting body, but need more membership than necessarily what would be in your voting body, such as the town manager. You know, I wouldn't expect the town manager or superintendent necessarily to have a vote. But the MSBA does require them to be on the project team, if you will. So that was the exact discussion. Not to say that, you know, it works today. I don't know that, but that we did understand a school building MSBA reimbursed would take a different shape.
Okay.
And this is something that a number of communities deal with. That obviously permanent building committees are becoming pretty common. So that's what happens basically as it becomes a subset of the school building committee.
Okay. And John, just circling back to like, where do you think that, you know, as far as based on the I think you had an April, May, or June timeline for submitting the statement of interest?
Yeah, last year, April was the deadline. My guess is it's going to be a little bit later this year, just based on their own timelines right now. So you're referring to when would the school building committee be established?
Yeah, when would it need to be established?
I would say once the MSBA invites us into the process,
Okay.
which could be summer of 2021 or later.
Okay. So we have, and I think we've discussed this with you, we've developed sort of an application process. So we just want to be out in front of that, whereby any body, whether it be the school committee or, you know, use the library board of trustees as another example, was proposing a project. There's an application that body would fill out for the permanent building committee. The permanent building committee, we haven't, it hasn't been around that long, so there's not a lot of history on how we handle those applications. We just want to be out in front of it.
Yep.
As we get to that point.
I think it's fair to say, so you have 9 months for all of that module 1. And there's a lot of work that gets done during that phase, mostly by town people. The maintenance plan is a significant piece of work that's generally done. So, you know, not that you can wait till day 269 out of the 270 to get any of those things accomplished, but I don't think there are specific interim milestones within there. So you'd have some time to work through that.
Yeah, Pat, interestingly, our the template we use to generate the permanent building committee's quote unquote project application is mirrored after the statement of interest. So it actually could be more or less a trial run or a draft version of what the schools would use to actually submit to the MSBA is the application that they would submit to us.
That's right, Greg. Thank you. Does anyone else on the building committee have any questions or comments? Chuck, do you or anyone else on the school committee have anything else you want to add?
I don't. I'm not sure if anyone else on the committee does. Anyone?
Chuck, I have one question or clarification, and Dale, this might be more for you. I seem to remember at the meeting that we had with you, this most recent refresh meeting, that we almost left that meeting with a relative understanding that the Birch Meadow side of Scheme B would not likely fall into the funding approval process of MSBA. That we were likely to get something, I think the number banding around was like 53% or something like that for the Killam side of the project, but the Birch Meadow side, after having done the Killam and all that other kind of fun stuff, was likely to not be selected because it would be too small at that point in time. Is that recollection correct? And if so, does that inform us for how we approach the town of Reading as a joint project if we so choose to go in that direction?
No, I think what you said is essentially correct. Again, a town can submit, and some towns do because of their needs, a statement of interest for, 2, 3, 4 projects. If you did that, they would ask you to prioritize what your priority project would be. And partly because of need, in all likelihood, yours would be the Killam site. In most communities, it's also usually fueled by the most costly because of the reimbursement. And then beyond there, some of it is conjecture. They would not bring you into the program for a second project until the first one is completed. So what John was kind of alluding to is that would put you, into completion of that second project at, 2030 or something. So could you wait that long? If no, you'd have to proceed and do it, on your own. And I'll kind of use that just to kind of emphasize a point I said before I'd speak to a little later, was the issue of a bigger school. Because one could make an argument, obviously, and say, well, let's look at 2 of the sites, came up boroughs, say, for instance, that could handle a larger building. And it's not to say you should rule it out, but if you solve, let's say, the Killam, that 660 students by doing 2 sites, it would mean, again, only one would be funded. So presumably a much larger portion of the project would, be greatly delayed, or else be built without reimbursement. And for what it's worth, that's how some communities sort of end up, between available land or not, end up doing a much larger 700, 800 student schools, whether it's elementary or otherwise, because otherwise the timeline stretches out so far. So did I answer the question? But I think reasonably, if you probably couldn't wait that long, but if you couldn't, you'd have to do it without reimbursement.
Yep, thank you. That answers the question.
Anyone else from the committee?
I think Aaron got a question.
Can't hear you, Aaron. You're not muted, but we can't hear you.
Who's that?
Aaron Gaffin.
Aaron Gaffin.
Can you hear me
Can't
now?
hear.
Yeah, we can. Yep.
Yes.
Sorry, I don't know what that was. I'm unclear in the timeline on when we would know how much money we would be getting from MSBA toward the project.
If they approve it, it's dependent upon a percentage, and Dale can, I'm sure, explain this better. So the type of community we are, where we get a certain percentage, and then there are some other things you can do to get a few more percentage points. So I'm not sure what we would qualify for.
Yeah. So John, can you flip to that sort of Gantt chart type diagram?
Oh, yeah, sure.
So here you kind of, if you will, get organized, maintenance, capital, plan, all of those things. And then you go through here, the schematic design. So at this point, this module find funding the project, that, oh, I'm sorry, I'm pointing, and of course no one can see my mouse. But that step, module 5, that is the end of that is 150 days, 120 days, you will sign, the town will sign a project funding agreement with MSBA, and that will have the total project cost and what their participation and reimbursement will be. So that's when, and that really locks you in for the rest of the project. So that's when you would know what MSBA's contribution would be exactly.
And is that before or after the town votes?
Yes, because you would sign the project and funding agree. Well, you'd have to get you would know that before you had to put it out to vote. Yes.
So we'd be going to the voters with whatever the remainder, the uncovered piece.
Well, the town, and this might be one of the accounting nuances Bob wants to address, but the town needs to vote the total cost, but it is structured that you only end up having to actually borrow the portion that you pay, but the town does need to vote the entire authorization.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Sure.
Gail, two sort of follow-up questions to that. The when the funding agreement would be signed, that would be before the town voted on the whole project. But would that be before or after the town voted on the schematic design funding? I don't know if that's a town vote or a town meeting vote, but the 1.7 would it be before or after that?
The one, there's those two check marks that are there. The top check mark, that's essentially where you vote that 1.7 million. So you have the 270 days there, and then that second check is when you vote the remainder, which is the rest of the design and the construction cost.
Okay, thank you. Oh, then just based on John's timeline, that module 5, funding the project, signing that agreement, what does that look like from a hard date standpoint as opposed to a time, on that timeline?
November
November
2023. Yep.
So it'd be kind of all in one. The town would be signing the funding agreement and going to town meeting for approval of the full amount.
Yes.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the building committee or the school committee that has any comments on the presentation?
Yeah, Pat, I guess the only follow-on question to Aaron's and yours is there any sense for, it's not a dollar value, but maybe a percentage of reimbursement from MSBA, and just trying to throw a dart or understand what the likely level of compensation back from the state would be? Is it dependent on need? Is it based on need relative to other communities at the time of the application? Is it based on some other criteria, the town and peer communities? Is there any, even the slightest sense of what that would be for the purposes of forming the argument and the pitch to the town?
I don't know,
That's a
Dale.
question for you.
Well,
Dale.
there's a number of factors. There is a sort of base level amount. And then, for instance, the MSBA will not pay for temporary facilities, for instance, where you swing space if you have to put the kids somewhere. They will only pay, there is a certain percentage, I apologize, I should know off the top of my head, for site improvements, meaning work, to the ground, landscaping, etc. Now, typically, the amount that they allow is adequate for a normal project. And I don't want to be trying to speak for the MSBA, but I think the notion of that is so that a town doesn't take the most unbuildable site and blast rock and ledge, to make it a buildable site if it's not necessary. So there is a kind of limit, but as I say, for the majority of schools that is adequate or close to. It will not pay for, for modulars. And then there are certain percentages for doing it, if you will, above and beyond the minimum required green or LEED type activities, you can gain a percentage or two. So at the end, the actual percentage comes out, you know, it varies by a number of things that you really can't answer 100% till you have the final building.
I think also we get points if you use the model school design versus another design. Is that true?
That is true. Yeah, you got some additional percentages if you do that. And that's a major time saver, which may or may not be that critical to Reading. For some towns. It's very, you know, it's a very significant consideration.
Was that Greg that asked that question?
Yes, it was.
Greg, don't quote me on this, but a community like Reading, if we're able to do some of the incentives, it'd be somewhere in the 50%, somewhere in that range.
Thank you. And only because I think, Dale, you mentioned it, is the, or maybe Dr. Doherty did as well, the model school. Is the Killam site lend itself to any of those models?
I'll say essentially yes, because we've certainly seen the model schools on all kinds of different sites, but because it is I don't know if generic is a fair word, but you know, you have essentially a flat, pretty buildable site, and there are various ones that are 2- and 3-story components, which you likely would need to fit there without taking the existing building down. And that, you know, that's going to be, you know, that's why I mentioned the temporary space, because that can be a very significant cost, you know, that's going to be important to the overall cost to the town. Maybe I should clarify what I meant. So if you can do a project where you don't have to spend money on swing space, leasing, you know, a place for the school, or building or erecting a number or leasing a number of modulars, if you can plan the project out to avoid costs for swing space, that ends up to be a savings to the town, because 100% spent on those things is town cost, not eligible for reimbursement.
If I could just add a note about the model schools. We're a long ways away from, you know, picking a delivery method, but I would advocate to investigate that fully. In addition to a little bit of extra reimbursement you get from the MSBA, at the end of the day, you get a design that's been sort of tried and true. It's been vetted. So there's a construction cost savings to that, not only on the cost of the project, but in the likelihood of change orders. Theoretically, it's something that's been built a couple times. So, you know, problems, potential delays, issues, etc., have been vetted out once. Again, we're a long ways away from making that decision, but while we're talking about it, I'd give a plug that I would advocate strongly to look hard at that model school program.
And it has probably a bit more reliable for a cost estimate also, because it's been bid a couple times. You have a reasonable idea.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so I'm going to give a sort of last call for comments, questions. I think we've covered everything. All right. So Dr. Doherty, Chuck, Dale, and everyone on the school committee, thank you very much for this presentation. It was extremely informative. I will say I've had some involvement. Been watching the presentations that are made at the school committee, as well as I've been invited to a couple of the working sessions, and I can say that that the process that the school committee and the facilities department, Joe and Gail, have done to date has been very thorough. We really appreciate all the hard work everyone has put in on this, and we especially appreciate you taking the time to visit us and fill us in on where you're at.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we-
Motion,
Yes.
motion to
on the
adjourn
floor.
the school committee.
Is there a second?
Second.
Carla,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Chuck, aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
All right. So more or less back to our regularly scheduled program. Did anyone, I don't know if anyone on the committee, obviously you guys had plenty of opportunity to ask questions and comment. I assume everyone's good with the information we got. No further need for discussion. John, I'm disappointed you didn't have some good questions for us.
Oop, you're muted.
So we moving on to the first item on the agenda.
I'm not muted now, right?
You're not muted.
You're good now.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought it was very helpful, by the way. I was impressed that we had that much information. I am sort of excited about getting into a little bit more detail as they go forward, but anyway. Yeah.
It really makes it real when Dr. Doherty put dates to those timeframes and those big dates, 270 days for this, whatever.
Right.
That was definitely helpful.
Yeah.
So so first item on the agenda, the approval of last month's minutes.
Right.
I didn't have it. I read through the minutes. I didn't have any comments. If everyone could take a chance to read through them. If anyone has any comments, discussion. If not, we could have a motion to accept.
Move to accept the minutes as submitted.
Seconded.
I'm gonna do a roll call vote in favor of Nancy,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Greg,
Aye.
Brad,
Aye.
approved. So the next item on the agenda was the police station. Checklist. I just need to pull that document up
Yeah, that'd be great.
and share my screen. Okay. So last month, we went through the police station checklist. I think we left the checklist without any real open-ended questions.
Right.
So I just wanted to make sure that we were all set with it. I'll take a quick pass through and make sure that to make sure that no one had any other questions or comments or changes. Just have the water heater highlighted, but I believe we discussed that. And we confirmed that the gas-fired water heater was in the capital plan for 2021. That's correct, right, Joe?
That's correct.
So unless anyone had any other comments, we'll table the police station. I think that checklist is done until we put together our final report. And we can move on to the town hall meeting. The town hall checklist.
Yep.
So the town hall checklist was done a while ago. It was one of the first buildings we reviewed. But we have pretty thorough notes that we've gone through once. We just need to finalize these notes before we move on to the next checklist. So just kind of walking through. the notes, the sidewalks, I think that's actually an action item. That there was some trip hazards at a few locations on the footpath. Should change this. Change this and include a recommendation that facilities or designer investigate further.
Actually, that should be noted that that would be discussed with the DPW.
Okay.
Joe, that is not the footpath which is not, it's not on the street. It's the footpath which goes between buildings. Is that DPW's territory? Yes, it is. That's still DPW, okay. Yep.
Joe, is that the courtyard?
Yes.
Other than the courtyard?
It's the courtyard and then out back also, the footpath out back, Bob.
Okay.
From what I remember, I believe. Isn't that correct, Kevin? The footpath is in the front of the building as it goes between the main building and the annex. It's not on the street side. It's not adjacent to the street. It's within the site. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I agree. I thought it was under DPW's purview. It was outside the threshold.
So should we change this note to say that recommend that DPW investigate further, or should we just leave it as facility/designer and you would pass it on to DPW?
You can leave it like that. I'll take care of it from there.
Okay, thanks, Joe.
Yep.
We're through with this. I'll go through and change all the color coding to a black font. The next item, granite curbing throughout is in good condition. It's more of an observation. Generally speaking, scores are 5s and 3s. I don't think we had any questions about those. The landscaping was not reviewed by the PBC. Patio system. Tree roots pushing up bricks and patio adjacent to the connector. Is this a duplicate of the sidewalks crosswalks note?
Yes. Yeah, I think this was mine. This was referring to the same thing.
Add a note, see item A 1.2 above. That makes
Well,
sense.
this says specifically tree roots pushing up bricks. I don't know. The walkway is concrete, so I'm not sure it really is the same item. But I don't know. I don't know what you mean by patio.
Yeah, there's like a patio area and there were bricks. It was adjacent to the connector.
Okay. So it's really a different item. It's a connected item, but a different item.
Okay, because I didn't know that the footpath was concrete. Okay. You want to just note that that's a concrete footpath there so that we know that they're different?
Well, I can just put in the same note. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's a recommendation that the facilities or the designer, being the I don't know, say on-call building doctor, investigate further. Site facilities, walkway canopy, dumpsters, exterior storage were all NA. The electrical service, just a note, the service and transformer were installed in 1990 as a part of the renovation project. Likewise, the note on the underground duct bank for the voice data system.
Pat, do we need X's in the PBC column on any of that?
I don't know that we do. We didn't really
look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't really look at we didn't look at the underground duct banks and the the underground sanitary sewer system.
Yeah, that's fair. Just
okay. So the ADA compliance. So I think Mike had a note about many areas of the building were not ADA friendly.
Yeah, I think Brad's red. Mike might be blue, but I think that
And
was
you're
probably
red?
mine. Yeah, I think I'm red.
Okay. Mike's green.
I'm green for the record.
All right.
So I was deferring mostly to Nancy on this one as far as ADA type.
They attempted when they did the renovation to make it as ADA friendly as they possibly can. But obviously it's an old building and they're not going to hit all the issues. They do have an elevator, they do have wide pathways. But, you know, in terms of cubicle areas, that's all worker areas, and they're not required at that time when this was renovated to actually be ADA friendly. It's only the public aspects of access. And they hit those when they did the renovation. That's changed actually in the new ADA rules, but it doesn't comply. It doesn't apply here because it was renovated so long ago.
We change this to something along the lines of note that many areas of the building did not appear to be ADA friendly.
I don't think that that's a fair thing to say. I think it is. I think the hallways and public access is actually pretty darn good.
Public areas, yeah.
Yeah, the public areas. So maybe the note says public areas appear to be ADA compliant. But I wouldn't worry about the non-public areas because at the time of the renovation for this project, they weren't required to be ADA compliant. They had to make accommodations if there are individuals who might be disabled who are working for the town, but it's not that the entire building had to be ADA compliant.
Are you saying, Nancy, that the public areas are ADA compliant with up to the present day standards?
Probably not to today's standards, but when they did.
I think that should be an important thing to qualify any statement which says it is compliant. I know the handrails don't comply, for example.
No, and the nowadays even the knobs on the doors are non-compliant. So I think the important thing to say is that it was compliant when it was renovated.
Well, I'm not sure that matters, does it? I mean, we're reporting on the condition of the building as it now stands relative to the existing standards or present day standards, and it doesn't comply.
I don't fully agree with that, because if someone reads this document and they see that you say it doesn't comply, then that means it must comply.
Right.
No, we can qualify it by saying there is no requirement to bring it up to present standards, but I don't think we should say it complies to an old standard which no longer exists.
I have no problem with that, as long as it's clear that we don't have to suddenly do work.
That's correct.
Maybe we should do it, but we're not required to.
That's correct.
Right. But I don't think there's anything wrong with us identifying that it doesn't comply with current standards. That's up to the town as to whether you want to spend money making it comply. We're just pointing out a condition, a deficiency, not a deficiency by law, but a deficiency by performance. And I don't think there's anything wrong with us pointing that out. In fact, I think that's our job.
Well, I would, as long as it's not pointed out as a legal compliance issue.
That's what
I have
I'm
no
saying.
problem.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It just needs to be clear that there's a standard, like an architectural standard or a design standard that might not be met with the current condition. I don't want to just say, like Bob's saying, I don't want to imply that somehow it's legally not in compliance, because it's not something that I would want to have on this document.
Not at all. Right.
Yes.
That can open up a can of worms. You don't want that. Yeah.
We'll never afford Killam.
No, you will never. No way.
I think the ADA friendly might be a good term, in fact. In other words, it says it's not friendly, but it's not.
So I would say, what I would simply, I'd state it very simply. The accessibility complied at the time of renovation. I wouldn't even go beyond that. I really wouldn't. I don't, it opens up a can of worms that really opens up some liability issues. So.
And I think we treated this the same with the fire suppression on some of the other buildings.
Correct. Yeah.
So that's a good way to phrase it.
Yeah.
And I would even suggest maybe not even using the word compliant, but in accordance with ADA design standards or something like that. I don't like the word compliant or non-compliant.
Yeah.
For the reasons we discussed.
That's why I use friendly.
Yeah, I think that would be fine too. Yeah.
Friendly's fine.
Or consistent with requirements at the time of the renovation.
There you go. That's even better, Greg.
I was looking at what we wrote for Killam for the sprinkler, but I'm back with you now. What do you guys want this note to say?
I like what Greg said, consistent at the time of renovation. Yeah.
We want to leave in many of the areas of the building. I'm going to change many because
I don't
think
even
it's
want to
many.
mention that. No.
You don't want to.
Because the public areas are what we're worried about at this point in time. We don't have to worry about the rest of the building. So, consistent, I would say something about consistent with the standards at the time of the renovation. Just leave it that. The building is consistent with ADA standards at the time of renovation. No recommendations.
No recommendations.
Or
They would have to bring it up to compliance if they do certain amount, as we talked about before, there's certain amounts of renovation that would kick it into compliance standards. But that would happen at that point in time. I think we're just making a statement that says it's consistent with what the ADA standards were at the time of the latest renovation, and leave it at that. That's all we need to worry
I was going to say recommend the town consider, I don't want to say upgrading, town consider addressing ADA as if any future renovations are made.
They would have to do that by code.
Okay. Right, that makes sense.
But I don't think there's an action there. I think the action box is going to get unchecked, Pat.
Yeah.
Thank you.
For that one.
All right. That looks good. So the next note, other than the quarter-inch max difference is allowed by ADA, I think that note is fine and it's something that should be looked at. I think it's actually a quarter-inch, not half-inch, but I don't want to be making
that's being
design
rectified.
decision.
That is getting rectified probably in the next 2 weeks.
Okay.
You guys okay deleting the quarter-inch?
Yes.
I mean, we're not, despite
Don't have
being
to
construction
specify it.
professionals, we're not doing this in a sort of a design consultant.
Correct.
Okay. All right, so moving on, I'm kind of obviously focusing on the items that had notes. If anyone sees anything that you want to go back to where there's no note, just interrupt me. The exposed foundations, there was some minor cracking. I'm just going to add that as an action item and with a note, sort of standard note. Recommend further investigation by facilities
/designer. Before we finalize this, we'll have a chance to kind of make sure that that particular note reads the same.
Yeah.
Every time, everywhere we use it. Everyone's good with that. The note on the structural wall elements is nothing more than an observation from either from a review of the plans or from the on-site walkthrough.
I did send you a note about the inconsistency within our document about describing the structure. This says it's a wood frame building. Elsewhere, we say it's a masonry load-bearing building. And we also say that the exterior wall has a brick veneer. So I don't know what it is. I've never seen the drawings, but we have 3 different descriptions for the building and only one can be true, I guess.
Okay.
So is this a wood frame building or not?
Yes, it is.
So the exterior wall is not load bearing, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So this.
Do you see anything that calls for an exterior load bearing wall? There's a note about the exterior is predominantly brick veneer, but that's veneer, it's not load
There's
bearing.
another one somewhere. Somewhere in the documents.
Columns and structural walls, load bearing masonry, wood frame, some steel, question mark.
The steel in the building is in the old library section of the building, where they had the old stacks, which goes up 3 stories. It has that modular system that's in there. I don't know if you
Yeah.
remember going up there where the dumbwaiter is.
Yeah, they got that funky steel floor, right?
Yep, it's a steel pan floor.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we shouldn't try to describe the building in this term. It doesn't do anything to the report, does it, really?
Well, make this, I got a lot going on my screen here, trying to hide pictures of you guys, see this spreadsheet. Let me just get back to that building. If I just change this to the existing original town hall building is a wood frame building. That's the building that's wood frame.
If that's what it is, yes. Yeah.
And then the structural wall elements. Okay. Again, just a commentary on the building, nothing major. But we did agree previously that we wanted to try to, lack of a better term, leave as many breadcrumbs as we can through these reports as to, you know, what have we came across in the building.
Sure.
So, membrane roof system, membrane roofing at the connector. Made a note that we did not go on the roofs. We did talk about Joe and Kevin. We talked about the roof being inspected annually. So we'll make a note of that. But we should have if possible, we should have the installation date of that and the warranty.
So there's 3 different types of roof systems over there at Town Hall.
Yep.
There's the annex that has the membrane roof, and there's the upper roof above the attic that's also a membrane roof. And we've also got slate, and we've got some asphalt shingles, small amount of asphalt. We haven't done a roof project at Town Hall, a full roof project over there since its renovation in '89. It's on the capital plan, I believe.
In 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, 3 or 4 years. Thank you, Bob.
So
We
on
what's on the capital plan for 3 or 4 years? Is that the asphalt shingles, the slate, the membrane, or all the above, or some of the above?
All the above, except for the annex connector, which we did as a small mini project.
Okay. So the new slate or repaired slate is on the capital plan?
That's a good question. We haven't decided yet. I know a lot of what they're doing out there now is they're doing a blend of recycled slate to save money because it's so expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah, that might be a historic committee discussion.
Correct. And that's the reason they do that, Bob, is because they want, what they do is they salvage and then they resell it on the market, from what we've learned. But we're in the real infancy stages of doing anything with that, but,
We just did a bunch of slate repairs over there a couple of years ago. We did some actually pretty extensive repairs.
That was back in 18, wasn't it, Kevin? I think we did made a project out of that.
Yeah.
And hopefully it was a facilities person today up on the roof jumping around, because if not, then we have ghosts. Right over my head.
They were up on that upper roof replacing a one of the air vents.
Okay.
Would an accurate statement be the slate and asphalt roofing replacement or repair project is included in the capital plan for, should I say, within the next 3 years?
I think that's fair.
Okay. Let's see. It's a note here. Water damage to masonry being caused by unconnected downspout at elevation facing the parking lot.
Where is that again? Can you say that? I can't really see the screen that well. Water damage being done.
I was trying to.
I believe we fixed that, Kevin. We should check that. I think that's been done.
Yeah, I'll have to look. I don't recall.
Pat, the facing has an extra T in there, by the way.
First sentence.
Could be affecting. You never know.
There we go. Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, Joe, sorry, I couldn't get myself off mute. Yeah, this is the elevation of the building closest to the parking lot where the ductless splits, the compressors for the ductless splits are right underneath the windows.
Yeah, I made a note of that. We're gonna take a look at that. I'm pretty sure we took care of that. I'm almost positive that's been done. But thank you.
Okay. So there was another note that I added here that I think we could discuss a little bit. But still a recommendation that the facilities adopt sort of a stricter than normal, sort of a zero tolerance procedure for inspections of the exterior of the town hall due to the historic status of the building. And I'd just like to sort of clarify that by saying in no way, shape, or form is that a criticism of the maintenance that's being done on the building now. We've said in the past, Joe and Kevin, we think you guys do a great job of maintaining buildings. It's just the nature of the building.
Pat, hold on. Pat, we can't hear you.
You were just possessed.
You can't hear me?
Yeah, now we can. You were
Now we
very,
can. It was all garbled.
yeah, very
Oh,
loud
sorry.
and garbled.
All right, so I'll try again. So, I don't mean this in any way as a criticism of of the maintenance that's going on at the town hall or any other building, we've said in the past that we think Kevin and Joe and the entire facilities department do a great job maintaining the buildings. But one thing I thought of was just the impact of having, say, a roof leak at the high school is a lot different than having a roof leak at a historic town hall like this. So I don't know if we even need to, but you know, having some sort of stricter than normal, you know, you've got your standard operating procedures that you follow to maintain these buildings, and maybe you're already ahead of this. Do you have like a different schedule for the town hall? And I'm talking mostly, I'm not talking about the boiler, I'm talking about the roof and the you know, the downspouts and the exterior brick and windows.
We do, and we the one thing that you guys did bring to light was the building envelope. And when I say envelope, I'm talking about the, you know, the mortar joints and things like that on the buildings. And we realized we need to do a better job of that. And that's why, like, after we walked around the senior center and we looked at the conditions over there, we did half that building this fall. We're going to do the other half in the spring. We were sort of tossing around the idea of getting that, you know, we have a mason contractor that's very good at doing historic restoration. So he's already done the senior center, and we're going to have him take a look at some areas at the town hall anyway. But that's an area that we do recognize we need improvement on. I will tell you that we do spend a lot of money every year on roofs. Roofs are something we are constantly up on the roofs, just making sure we're not deferring any maintenance, because you start doing that, it's a slippery slope. Painting is another thing on these buildings with wood trim. We saw that at Joshua Eaton. You guys, after we walked Eaton, we replaced, I don't know how many 100 feet of board over there. Did the main entrance over at that building. So we do try to stay on top of this stuff, but the building envelope, and when I say the envelope, I'm talking the exterior walls of the buildings that have brick or sealants. We understand that we need to, I'll say step it up a little bit, but we are cognizant of that. So, but thank you.
Okay. So I don't know if we even need to include that note in that note of the report. I don't know if I get some feedback from some of the building committee members, if we think that's a worthwhile recommendation, or it feels like it's covered at this time.
Yeah, Pat, I think zero tolerance may not be the right language there, but in the other, and Joe mentioned it, the Joshua Eaton fascia and a few other places we've identified some envelope and masonry repairs. Maybe we adopt the similar language that we included in some of the other checklists relative to increased frequency of the exterior envelope inspections and repair as necessary, and just reference that there's additional diligence due to the historic nature of the building in that same comment.
Okay. That makes sense to me. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that?
I agree. I think that's a great option to do.
All right, I'm gonna just kind of scroll ahead and see if we have that note already in there for sealants and caulking. Don't. Give me 1 second. I will just copy something over somewhere where I think I know it was. Which
Sealants is B4.7.
Thank you.
Yeah, it almost looks like you could take that last sentence and just add at the end of it with a, you know, particular focus or especially considering the historic significance of the building.
All right. What particular attention
be paid to this item due to such a horrible typer. Nature of the building. Try that on for size.
It fits.
All right. I'm gonna scroll back up. I'm gonna try and pick up the pace a little because it's getting late. I'm starting to get punchy. All right. See where we were. Wood framed. Slate roof. So I'm going to take out everything right there.
Yeah.
No.
Just go back to that word facting. You
Yeah.
deleted the I and
How did that?
You got it.
you deleted the I instead of the T.
Did I?
Yeah.
That's.
It's late.
Glasses.
And then I think the second sentence can also be deleted. Some downspouts were not connected to the building. That's kind of the same thing as the first sentence.
Yeah.
Maybe just add an S to downspout in the first sentence.
Save on this before I lose it all. Okay. All right, moving on. Exterior walls, brick. Just a couple general notes, predominantly brick veneer. I think Mike noted that they were from different time frames.
It's like we need to adjust the condition from a 4 to a 3, maybe.
Yeah.
Have to pick one.
Or is that Howard denoting 3.5?
I was actually giving it a 7.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's how it works. I was supposed to do that to call our attention to it. That should have been highlighted. Thanks, Brad.
Yeah, and this looked like it was just a general comment that I gave you on exteriors that we didn't know where to put it, but
Yeah, so I think we're covered there. We can just delete that.
yeah, I think I'm good with that. Are there any exterior CMU walls on that, or was it all just brick? What's the foundation?
Granite, isn't it?
Yeah, it's granite block.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's granite.
Okay, yeah, you can delete it. Move on.
Yeah. All right, so the sealants, that's the note we just added, that we copied over, that we used from the schools. Doors, windows.
There are storm windows on the exterior of those single pane double hung windows, correct?
Correct.
That's correct.
So you might put that down. That's important.
Yeah, no doubt. With, should I say with?
Yeah,
Exterior storm windows.
Yeah.
That's pretty much throughout the building.
Right.
Okay.
And that's part of the historic aspect of it.
Right. I had a note that there was some exterior louvers that were rusty. I would change this from possible replacement. I don't know that it really gets to that level, but maybe a recommendation for further investigation. If I recall correctly, Joe, these were some of the lower. They were lower on the building. They were these small louvers, and they seemed like they were pretty tired.
That's under the, where you're talking about is over near the DPW administrative offices. There is a, that was once a dirt floor down there. It's basically a deck built above a dirt cellar over there, and that's those events over there that you're talking about.
Okay.
On the Woburn Street side of the building.
Yeah. So it's not anything that I see like is, you know, dire or anyone's gonna run out, but if you're gonna be looking at the exterior of the building, you know, those are probably worth looking at. See what kind of shape they're in. They look like they were pretty tired.
Yep.
I'm gonna delete this first note. This is sort of a
Yeah.
something we talked about a while ago.
You can unhighlight wall finishes offices as well when you have a chance later.
Yeah, thank you. Do it now. Otherwise I'll miss it. So I had a note, throughout the basement, sheetrock was all covered with FRP. And there were dehumidifiers running. I mean, it's an old basement space. Kind of is what it is. We actually had this discussion about the what building was that? Was that the
Senior center it was.
Senior center, yeah.
Yeah.
We talked about the basement and, you know, how dehumidifying isn't a solution to the problem John pointed out. It can be an indication of a problem. I don't know that there's much you can do with a situation like that, you know, with an old historic building with a, you know, granite foundation, but just an observation that you know, between the FRP over the sheetrock is obviously to prevent mold, which makes sense, and the dehumidifiers running, that, you know, there's a humidity dampness in the basement. I don't know if it's one of those things, there's not much you can do about. I don't know if we need to have this note, if anyone has any thoughts.
Do we leave it in the senior center?
Well, we already ended in the senior center.
Where are you seeing that at the town hall, the FRP?
I thought the entire basement, the walls were like an FRP.
They're drywall, and there's almost like a
texture on it.
Yeah, it's almost like a cloth covering, almost like a wallpaper. I think from what we can just.
It's a wall system that was put in.
Yes, exactly.
It's not FRP though. That's not FRP.
Okay.
And the only
that could be. I definitely saw some. You know, I could be using the wrong terminology.
The only reason we generally will install FRP panels in any of the buildings is because, and it's mostly just to protect the walls more than anything in a bathroom. But because if you had glazed block, we'd never have this issue. You know what I mean?
Yep. So it's do it in a janitor's closet or something.
Right. It's easier
exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. But there
the
was kind of cool.
The only place in town hall we have a dehumidifier is in historical, where the historical records are down there in the basement. There's historically, no pun intended, always been a dehumidifier down there as long as I've been here. And we just replaced that last year. And then you're correct, there is one down in the senior center as well.
Yeah.
But at the senior center, we have DX cooling down there, which, as you all know, is also a form of dehumidification. So.
Yep.
So Pat, this particular item is for wall finishes in the offices. I don't know if the dehumidifiers, were you trying to tie that in with something on the wall finishes, or does that note need to move somewhere else for the action? I don't know that there's an action associated with wall finishes on the offices. It may be a dehumidifier issue, but it sounds, I don't know if there's any real need for them to do anything at this point.
I think I would agree. I don't know. I think we can probably delete this note. You're right. The wall finishes. It's probably not the right place for this. I just wanted to bring to Joe and Kevin's attention, you know, the dehumidifiers. I understand there's not much you can do about it. And I think we decided to effectively delete the note in the senior center. So I'm okay taking this out.
Okay, maybe leave that first sentence,
Sure.
and then we
Just
need
as an
to,
observation.
yeah, then we just need to give it a rating.
That coating over sheetrock comes down again, just below where it says wall finishes others. I'm not sure that that belongs in the offices. Right, you've got wall finishes others, some coated drywall in basement.
Oh,
Yeah, so the purple note was
Redundant.
my note and the green was, I think, Mike.
So
So
you can
we're
eliminate.
both
I think-
talking about the same thing. I think
Yeah.
that could just go away. Or we could move this.
Yeah, put the note into others for the basement because
Others,
it's not
yeah.
really office, right?
Right.
Delete
it.
that.
Yep.
And then we
Move
just
down to the-
need a rating. We want to check the facilities PVC boxes and give it a 3 or a 4.
For the wall finish in the offices.
Yeah. Joe, what do you rate it? What do you think? 3 or a 4?
Everything gets a 5.
Okay, okay, then I guess we don't need a facilities department anymore. Wow.
I thought like the finishes in that basement area and throughout were in good condition.
I would give them a 3. I think a 3 is fair for the age of the building. That's my opinion anyway.
All right, I'll go with a 3. I can be sold on that. Next item, the wood trim throughout the buildings in good condition.
Go up a little. Pat, is that in the right?
There you go.
There you go. Put the 3 in the.
And Pat, I was going to just chime in. I think the issue with water is, and maybe the reason that item was phrased the way it was the carryover from the senior center. We certainly, when we toured it, it sort of smelt damp, felt damp. I think they had a couple extra humidifiers and floor fans running, trying to dry the place out. And that was a byproduct, I think, of that catch basin out in the street that it overflowed. So they actually had had just recently had a water ingress situation because of heavy rains and flooding of that structure. I think the, town hall is a different scenario. It is granite block. There are, probably no vapor barriers in the basement per se, lending to the, the humidity issue, but I think slightly different scenarios. Could be something somewhere else, and I'm not sure that interior finishes is the right place for, where we just comment on dampness due to, foundation types. And certainly isn't anything you would address ever unless for some mysterious reason, like the library, you were doing a major renovation where you had access to the outside and could do positive side waterproofing and a vapor barrier.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right, Greg. I mean, I guess the place would be, exterior, but I don't know that we really need to. I think we beat this up pretty good. But we could put a note if the committee thinks it makes sense. We could put a note under exterior that there's some dampness in the basement. But again, it's not something you would address, to your point, unless you're doing a major renovation.
And it's been specific to the town hall. I'm not sure I would classify it as problematic.
Right, I agree. I think we're good without a note. So there's a note on the hallway fire doors, a wooden hallway door that had a magnetic hold open. Brad, you read?
I am. Yeah, I don't know, Joe, if you or Kevin are aware of if there's fire doors in that building or not, but there was a magnetic door holder, but it wasn't in use. The door was just closed all the time. It wasn't being held open.
I'll look into that.
Where was the door?
The note says it was on the second floor near the elevator, where I had noted it.
Talking about the door going back down there. Yeah, Kev, around the back
Anthony?
end. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe just take a look at some of the other doors in the building, see if any of them have similar magnetic door holders. I don't know if those are supposed to be open at all times and only closed during fire, or if they're even tied in. They may not even be tied into the fire alarm system.
I don't think they are.
Yeah, I don't think they are either.
So,
the
so
hallway
something worth
magnetic
looking at, Joe.
doors are
Put it
all
on
tied
as an action item. I'm
What
sorry,
was that?
Bob, did you say something?
Yeah, the magnetic doors in the hallways between the annex, for instance, are tied into the fire alarm.
Okay. So I don't know, Joe, just when you have a chance, if you can look into those doors.
We will.
All right. The next note is just, I think Brad had a note question about specialty interior doors. My answer to that, Brad, and anyone can chime in. It's anything that's not a standard door. So a vault door would be a specialty door. If there was a coiling door, which there are coiling doors, probably, I assume, quite a few of them in the town hall, you know, at the pass-throughs. You know, pretty much anything that's not a standard door would be a specialty door. Right? I don't know if we can really.
Yeah, we just
define
rated
what
it. We just
exactly it is.
rated them a 4, and it wasn't. I mean, maybe just some clarity on which doors that falls under, or you can just delete it. I don't know that it's critical for our documentation purposes. I was just more curious which ones were being rated a 4.
Okay. I would say it would be the doors at the pass-throughs.
The window doors you're talking about, right? So
Yeah. I'm drawing a bit of a blank on those.
I think isn't there one at the town clerks? I can't remember.
Yeah, there's a lot of areas in the town hall that were once larger areas that have been built out over the years that do not have specialty doors in them. But you're right, the town clerk's door, select board meeting room doors, the conference room doors, you know, there's a smattering of it throughout the building that are not historically correct. I'll call them, or specialty. They're just because we
just backing up. What I was referring to is at the countertops.
He's talking about the roll-up doors.
Oh, I
roll-up door.
apologize. I'm sorry.
So I would consider those specialty doors. I can't recall if those were steel or wood, but I do recall that whole space being in, you know, it's been a while since we were there, was generally in good condition. The counters, the wood trim around those openings, where there was wood chair rail, you know, it was well kept and in good condition. And I think some of those doors were down. I don't think we operated any of them, but they were just generally in good condition. So I can put a note, just says rolling doors at counters.
Gotcha.
I think that would answer. I'm kind of catching up with what Brad was
That works.
All right. We keep moving. ACT throughout building, good condition. Another one here with the other ceilings. I would say the other ceiling would be the exposed steel ceilings in the, what's that other building called, Joe? What would you refer to that as?
Well, we call that it's the old library, right, Bob? Would you call it?
Yeah, we call it the annex.
The annex.
There's the town hall building and the town hall annex.
So that had like an exposed steel structure, right?
Correct.
So the ceilings in those areas, or at least portion of it, were steel. Those would be the other, which were all in, you know, they rated a 4 for me.
Technically, they're not really ceilings, they're just floor structure of the floor above. It's open ceilings, exposed.
Exposed. The perspective.
They're basically library stacks.
Yeah.
Which are which have a floor, but they're stacks. They're library stacks. It's not fireproof construction.
Are there any wood ceilings?
Like John's ceiling.
Like John's ceiling, yeah.
Not that I recall.
I'm in the kitchen. I'm putting some scallops in the oven, so it's okay.
We'll be over.
Yeah, we'll be right over.
Glad we have your full undivided attention. Do you want to figure out what the other ceilings are?
Or give us a look at those scallops.
I'll show them to you. There they are.
Whoa.
I'm moving on to flooring.
Okay.
I'm still stuck on scallops.
I'm going to get a martini soon if you're not careful.
Anyone want to take a crack at what the other flooring was that we rated a 4? I'm drawing a blank.
At town hall?
Yeah.
Yep.
Unless it was the steel ceiling that we just rated it for.
Yeah, what
Well,
are
that'll
the
be a
big
steel floor. It's the same ceiling.
floors in the
That steel structure is getting a lot of play tonight. It was weird.
It's just the other side of the ceiling.
Yeah.
The basement floor is where, Joe?
in the bathrooms, the basement bathrooms?
They're tile.
The tile, okay.
Maybe this is the dirt floor then.
We are all getting punchy.
Trying to think, yeah.
I'm gonna leave that blank. I think it's fine.
Okay.
You know, other encompasses if there's a small epoxy floor somewhere, anything that's not covered
Yeah,
above.
we can make some notes next time we inspect it.
Yeah.
Stairs, no comments there. I had a comment about the handrails being in good condition. A note on the toilet rooms that they were upgraded in 90 as part of the renovation project.
Not to interrupt, Pat, but now that I'm thinking of it, I know when we did the technology area over down there, we put LVT down there. I don't know if that's what you're referring to, maybe.
I don't know. I don't think so. LVT for me would fall under resilient flooring.
Okay.
Form of VCT/rubber. LVT is basically luxury vinyl tile, right?
Right.
Which is just a fancy way to say more expensive VCT. That's a little better. I'm gonna keep moving. Toilet rooms, we're good there. Signage, did have good signage throughout. Oh, Brad, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, these are just
talk about
all
this is something we struggled with early on with some of the stuff that was designed for a school building.
right.
Is Bob's conference room the theater and stage?
Only on Tuesday nights.
I'm coming over. I think like even the conference rooms, you know, generally speaking, those you know the walls and floors and ceilings and components of that should be covered, and we don't necessarily need, unless anyone feels differently, we don't need like separate items for those rooms.
Right.
That's fine. I was just making some notes.
No, I got you. I appreciate it. More notes is better in my mind. More things for us to talk about. Who's blue? This is John. John, you're up. You got to get off your scallops.
No, I'm off my scallops. Okay. A blue? Oh, yes, storage racks. Top level, annex building, not anchored at the ceiling. I don't know what else I can say about that.
I'm going to say recommend further review.
Yeah, sure.
Is that up in the attic?
Yes.
Okay.
Haven't got to the MEPs yet.
You want to put an X in the action column there as well?
I do. Thank you. Mike, you're up on this one.
I think you just changed the question mark to a period.
There you go.
Or an exclamation point.
All right. Plumbing systems, no notes. Food service, no food service, but there are a few kitchen lunch areas. Do we need to rate them? I would say not, because like a small kitchenette, the walls, the floors, the cabinets would be covered in items above. and then appliances like a residential style appliance that's in a kitchenette, the useful life on that is such that I don't think it really falls under what we're trying to contemplate here.
Right.
All in favor?
I would agree with that.
All right. All right. So the HVAC system throughout was upgraded in 1990. The purple, those are my notes. So I just, you know, I think I'd pre-populated this before we walked. Looks like Brad had a note that 1990, that's 30 years ago, and we have a lot of stuff with 4s and 5s. I would say that's a testament to the maintenance program that the facilities department has the HVAC system on.
The boilers were replaced as part of the performance contracting in 2009. And then if you go down to cooling plant, chiller was also replaced in 2009.
Building controls would fit into that category as well, wouldn't they, Joe?
Yep, and we added a controls package to the building too.
Did I already go by the controls?
Yeah.
Good. That's a Johnson control system.
Yep.
Upgraded, is that the right term?
Installed.
Install, it was brand new.
Yeah, okay. Installed in 2009.
Mhm.
Okay.
Did they do the thermostats then too, or did they just use the existing?
No, all new.
Update the line above too, Pat.
Oh. Okay. Guys, do a copy paste.
See where all these 1990s are disappearing?
Yeah.
Kev, what about the pumps and the pumps were, the house pumps replaced over there too?
No, the house pumps were original, but we just did one this year. It's brand new.
All right, well, we could leave that alone then. Well, one pump replaced, okay, in 2020.
Yeah.
Water treatment. Let's change this note. The water treatment is serviced annually or
Correct.
more frequently.
Service monthly during the heating season.
Backflows are inspected annually, right?
Yep.
When's the last time they did an insulation upgrade?
That whole boiler room was re-insulated as part of that project.
2009.
Yep.
You say in the boiler room?
Yep.
Yeah.
Did he do the bleaching there too, Kevin? They did all that, right?
I think so. During the boiler removal, they, I think they did all that.
Okay.
Just looking if there was a line item for boiler flue breaching. Okay. Looks like there was a note about the 5 on the chillers that probably came from commentary of being 30 years old, which is not correct because it was replaced in 2009. So I think we're okay with that 5.
Yep.
Yep.
Can you scroll back up, Pat? I think my note might be able to get deleted now as well.
I thought I deleted that. Apparently I didn't. All right. Yeah.
Maybe hit save before you lose anything else.
All right, cooling plant.
Is that all still 1990s vintage?
Well, I would say the pumps and piping are, because as I said, there's 3 main pumps over there, and they were all, I would say definitely from 1990, but we did replace one this year. And the one that we took out and replaced with a new one, we had it rebuilt and we have it there as a spare for a backup.
Is that the heating system?
Cooling or?
Well, so there's 3 pumps there. Pumps 1 and 2 are for heating. Pump 3 is only for the chiller. We only run that during the summertime when we're running the air conditioning.
And was that the one that got rebuilt?
No, one of the ones that the one that we replaced was
above the
heating.
heating.
It was pump 1 or pump 2. I can't remember. It was
Yeah.
for the heating though. I know that for sure.
Okay, and so when you replaced it, you rebuilt one, and are they all the same, more or less the same
They're all the
size?
same. They're all the same Bell and Gossett pump.
So there's 3 installed and a 4th spare.
There, yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Kevin or Joe, are there any issues with condensate pumps in that area? I have a note on mine.
So some of the units in town hall, and Joe, you might have to correct me on this. I think that the building was kind of retrofitted for air conditioning. So those fan coil units that are scattered throughout the building, some of them, the condensate drains gravity, and some of them have condensate pumps inside the cabinet of the unit. They're just individual little, like you would see on the side of a residential furnace.
And most of those are in the basement. The ones with the pumps.
Maybe that's the source of the humidity.
I don't know. I had a note on mine that didn't make it into Pat's, maybe for good reason, that just said condensate pumps leaking / failing. And it's right next to where I had noted those fan coils as well. So maybe the two are related. But I don't have a real good recollection of it because it was 15 months ago, and I probably overheard somebody else describing as we were walking, so I don't have a good memory to stand on.
There we go. Remember my wording further. So I'm just going to put that as a note. The further investigation of the condensate drains, pumps, and the fan coil units. And I'm having a recollection of that as well, Mike. But I think it was, I just recall, I think you talking about it with Joe and Kevin.
Do you want to just move that note in the X up 1 line to put it on the fan coils from 90s renovation, and then we got to rate it?
I'll start the opening bid with a 3.
Sounds good.
All right. Equipment. Just notes about the renovation in 1990. Is that correct for all of these units?
Yeah, none of there's only really one air handler that's in the attic of the main building, and that's from 1990. And there's one rooftop unit on top of the annex, and that's also from 1990.
Okay. And those would be 3s and 4s.
Were the split systems newer? They have a 5 rating.
Well, if you're talking about, those are the ductless splits. Yes, there's one for the RCTV room behind the conference room on the first floor. There's one for the town clerk's office. And
Let me check the date on that right now. Let me check and I'll let you know what that was.
Maybe just delete that note for that line.
I'm gonna delete it. I'm gonna throw a yellow highlight on, And you don't need to do it now, Joe. If you think of it tomorrow and you send me an email as to when those were done, I can pop it in.
All right, I'll
Or if you
look.
find it right now while we're going, but we'll keep going.
Okay.
Move through air distribution.
Yeah, that's
Nope.
all correct. 1990, that's correct.
Okay. All right. Electrical, we're getting there. You see site transformers upgraded as part of 1990 renovation.
2007 on both those split systems. I'm sorry, 2007 for RCTV and 2013 for the town clerks.
Good. All right, Mike, tell us about the transformers.
Oh, boy. Trying to remember that service room. I believe I was in there with Greg, dragged him into this mess too, but there was quite a bit of heat being given off, and I had a note that it may not be needed service clearances, but I think that was town hall. It was pretty tight in there.
Yeah, well, it is.
So we do have that switch gear. We started to do that program that we talked about at the other buildings. And I think we made our way through 4 facilities of the building in the town buildings, and then we got shut down with COVID. So we do have plans to continue to do the other buildings.
Okay. Does it make sense? The note significant heat being given off by the units is kind of non-technical and kind of loose. Does everyone agree if we delete that note? Stay with me here. Delete this end of these notes and make a note that Greg, maybe you can help me out with the wording of the testing that or Joe, that's being done.
The infrared testing? No, not Greg.
It was.
You already had the note in that line about the switchgear testing. You deleted it.
Yeah, that was kind of a loose. I thought that was like that was before. We made that note before Joe started implementing the testing.
Didn't we make it for one of the school buildings? It should probably be the same note. I don't know.
Yeah. I will. I was thinking the same thing. Come on.
And while you're hunting, a minor technicality, the site transformer would be sitting outside somewhere, so I don't know we'd necessarily be worried about heat generation inside the building from that. It was likely a step-down transformer if the building was fed with, 13.8 or 4160 volt, or it was a step-down transformer or multiple transformers for something else that was probably causing heat in the room.
That's what I was referring to, Greg.
Yeah. You know what, Nancy, I think when we finalized those checklists, I think we incorporated that language into like our narrative.
I think you're right. Yes.
So it's not there. I don't know. Oh, Greg, you're the guy. Just tell me what to write. Is it infrared testing? Is that the right term?
Yes.
Switch gear. Throughout town buildings has been implemented. Do you have any idea when you think town hall will get done, Joe, and where it stands on your list?
I'm trying to locate my folder on that. I'll have to get back to you on that.
All right.
Get all thrown off.
I don't want to be a dead horse, Pat, but on the heat thing, I grant that it was sort of inarticulate and subjective, but is there a point at which heat being generated by electrical equipment like that would require a certain amount of ventilation of that space? I don't know, maybe it didn't reach that threshold for anybody else. And I'm not sure that it did for me, but
I don't know, maybe Greg, I don't know if you want to weigh in. And Mike, I didn't mean to dismiss your comment. I thought with a comment, you know, in the line below about doing the testing, we were kind of covered. And I recall the piece of equipment you're talking about. And there's some challenging, you know, it's an old building. So a lot of that back of the house space, there's not much of it. You know, it's tight quarters. That's kind of the nature of the beast, but that was, so I don't know, Greg, I think you walked through that. Was that anything that jumped out at you?
Yeah, I think similar to Mike, I'm struggling with the recollection of the specifics, but generally speaking, I would say, and Mike, not to be dismissive, the comment about heat generation from a transformer, not from the site transformer, but certainly in the switchgear room. So that comment could have just moved down another line to excessive heat buildup. And yes, it is a valid observation and a note that we should carry through, something to the effect of the town should probably investigate ventilation of the room to avoid excess heat from installed equipment.
Yeah, I see what you're saying about the site transformer line item now. I didn't realize I'd stuck that on there.
Yeah. The excess heat buildup was observed in the main electric room, or do we want to be specific to the step down transformer?
I wouldn't be specific to the piece of equipment, just high heat generation, and recommend investigating ventilation.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. Sorry, I didn't mean to like scroll, you know, dismiss that note. I just left this out as town hall is scheduled to be tested. And Joe,
Maybe you just want to put it in 2021 or something.
Yeah, I don't, not really, unless there's some relative idea that it is going to be tested in 2021, which I think it is. I know Joe has a schedule. So if he doesn't need to do it right now, but if you can get back to me that that's most likely tested in 2021, I would change that note. Unless you're pretty sure it will be, Joe.
Yeah. I wish I could put my hands in that folder. I'm sure it's in here somewhere, but the plan was
just highlighted as something you can confirm.
Period, just so you guys know, but it got tossed, everything got thrown out, you know.
Yeah. Understood. All right.
And just for the nuance of it, infrared is the company doing the testing, right, Joe? It's not just infrared testing.
Correct.
Can Joe or Greg, can you give me a good term for that type of testing?
Are we calling it switchgear testing?
Perfect.
A second, and I'll give you the exact terminology. Just give me a second.
I could give you the specifics of what they're doing, but to give it a single name, I think switchgear testing / maintenance or service is perfectly acceptable for these purposes. They should be cleaning
switchgear to electrical equipment.
Yeah, they should be doing cleaning, torquing, mechanical checks, visual inspection, possibly primary, secondary injection testing, high podding the bus, all sorts of good stuff.
So switchgear testing, servicing of existing of electrical equipment throughout town buildings has been implemented. Sounds pretty good. Looks like we know what we're doing.
I think switchgear and electrical equipment is redundant. You could either say testing, servicing of electrical equipment or switchgear testing, servicing, one or the other.
Okay, sound good?
Yeah.
Oh, look, step down transformers.
Alrighty.
Thanks, Brad.
Electrical distribution, panel boards, Mike, I note no arc flash labeling. Is that something we want to note? Or is there anything else we want to say about that? Is there any recommendation we want to make?
We wanted to make the recommendation that should be in every building in the town. The only place we ever saw electrical safety labels and arc flash labels, and they weren't even specific to the requirements of 70E for boundary distance and available incident energy, was Wood End, and that's because it's the newest of the buildings.
Should we just, under no arc flash labeling, should we say recommend further review?
This is a similar, this is a related or a second cousin to the accessibility questions in ADA. Realistically, arc flash would be part of your coordination study, and all of the arc flash warning labels would be derived from the available incident energy that's developed during the coordination study. So unless you're going to go back and generate a coordination study for every building, you're never going to get arc flash labels that actually are accurate for the panels, the loads, the available fault current, etc.
Are they required, Greg, right now, or is it only when it's been upgraded?
Similar to the accessibility question, Nancy, if you were doing a new building or a major expansion or renovation where you had new electrical distribution switchgear, you would be doing a coordination study, and you'd have the wherewithal to develop all of these arc flash labels. But to go back and do it retroactively, you'd have to hire an electrical engineer and do a tremendous amount of investigative work and then run the program. You'd have to know all the feeder lengths and the available fault current and all the gear that's in place and all the overcurrent protective devices in order to inform that study. And it's nothing you'd ever do. The most prudent thing, though, would be to have a general label on all the panels that says, danger, live voltage or high voltage, and then, the electrical arc hazard. There's a generic arc flash sticker that could go on most of the panel boards, but that's about all you could do without a significant amount of cost and effort.
So there is sort of a labeling that could be done that would improve the current situation. It wouldn't be a bringing it up to code thing. Is that what you're saying, Greg?
Yeah, they're generic electrical safety stickers that you could put on the panel boards. But again, it falls back to that, a lot of the same commentary about, code at the time. The building's been in operation for how many years, and no one has inadvertently, at least to my knowledge, stuck their hands into a live panel and been whacked by it. So, current practices that have been in effect for the lifespan of the building, even in, since 1990, have been sufficient.
Do we have the same issue in all the buildings, all the town buildings?
Yes.
Or is this unique to the town hall?
No, it's the same condition in every building.
Other than Wood End?
Except Wood End, yeah.
Except
Hopefully
Wood End.
not the library.
Probably the library. Yeah.
So is there a liability issue on this one that we want to not have this note, or that we need to further develop the note?
So is this a danger only to someone with access to the panel working on it?
Yes.
Okay.
Someone walking down the hallway is not at risk.
Yeah, as long as it's locked.
Yeah.
So, how do we have a panel on the ADA?
Well, I think if it's not a requirement right now, then I wouldn't recommend it. It's not a bad practice for them to put it on, but I'm not so sure that we want to get into a situation where we're telling them they need to do it, because you never know, somebody will come back and read this and said, look, you didn't do this. And then we'd be held liable for it. It's a little slope that you have to kind of navigate.
Yeah, Joe, when you had the that OSHA inspector come through and do the inspection, did this issue ever come up? Labeling, electrical labeling?
No, it did not. But going back to what you asked me, it's infrared scanning and switchgear maintenance.
Yeah. I think that note covers it.
The bigger thing that they brought up on the survey was storage in those electrical rooms. That was something that in schools becomes a big problem because, or actually, well, the schools more than the town buildings, but the back of house storage is minimal. And so that's what the fire department comes after us for, when they do their walkthroughs. Nothing can be stored in front of panels. You have to have a clear distance around all the panels, nothing stored against them.
Yeah, Pat, just to circle back on the panel boards, I don't think we need no arc flash labeling, and I don't think there's an action on that.
Does everyone else,
Top of your list.
yeah, does everyone else agree with that?
I would agree with that.
Okay. The only question in my mind is if we wanted to highlight it and recommend that facilities consider adding some labels, but as you put it, Greg, those would be generic labels. They wouldn't be specific. And, you know, this situation has existed, at least in its current form, since 1990, in a different form long prior to that. And to the best of our knowledge, there's been no issues. So,
Greg, if you can just delete, or Pat, if you can delete the action on that too.
oh yeah, thank you.
And I think especially in the light of a recent audit from an outside entity like OSHA, if they didn't flag it as a signage or a safety concern, then I don't know that we should highlight it either.
Okay. Lighting. High bay areas. This should apply to the old library that is a 2-story cubicle area. Is that the steel floors / ceiling area?
It's
Coming back to haunt us
next
again?
to that. It's the big open area. It's public
Oh,
service.
okay. Yeah, okay.
What kind of lighting do you have in that area?
Just fluorescent.
What condition is it in?
It's in good condition. I don't think that wasn't part of the Resco project, correct, Joe? We didn't do lighting in there.
No, we did not.
I'll start the bidding at a 4.
What? I was gonna say a 3, but 4. I'm good with 4. Anyone? What's the lighting like in there, Joe and Kevin?
It's in good shape. I mean, you know, it's fluorescent. There's really not much more you can say.
Oh. All right. Good?
Good.
Yes.
So a lot of occupancy sensors in the office.
Yeah, what are we constituting as lighting controls? Are those lighting sensors in all the rooms? Motion
Would the
detector.
cutoff for lighting controls be if you had like a main system or local? What is the system in the town hall? Is there a main system or is it just local occupancy sensor switches?
Yeah, just local control and switches.
I think the occupancy sensors are considered lighting control.
Okay.
We could just put the note up on the offices then.
Yeah, it's like anything beyond manual control constitutes lighting controls. It's just the level of sophistication from occupancy sensors all the way up through a full Lutron system.
Right.
So how about a note that says local occupancy sensors in offices? And then
are they in the corridors too? I think they're in the corridors because I remember them turning on when I'm standing there waiting for a meeting or off while I'm talking.
How about local occupancy sensors throughout building?
Yeah,
Throughout building. And we'll give it a 4?
sure.
Works. Should 25-pound capacity elevator. We didn't ride in it.
I've ridden in it. It's okay. It's slow.
Are we good with the elevator as a 4? With a note that's 2,500-pound capacity for those that are interested.
Sure.
That's good.
Um,
Is there a reason that the dumbwaiter has a danger side on it? Is it really a danger, or is it just?
I think that's commemorating a staff member who got shoved in there many, many years ago. Before my time.
Is the dumbwaiter used?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
Move books and stuff up and down or drawings.
Yeah, it goes up to the attic storage.
Okay.
Hey, not really a joking matter. I could tell you a horror story about somebody got decapitated by something like that.
So you know, is the sign that says danger, you know, a sign that's there because if you have a dumbwaiter, you should have a, you know, a cautionary note because you could get hurt. So it's kind of like the arc flash labels.
Was that a handwritten sign, danger?
So I don't remember
recall.
Not sure.
You can delete the note if it says danger and the local occupants are aware of it. Then I think that probably covers it. I was just more curious if it's locked out and it needs maintenance, or if it just needs to be taken completely offline for whatever reason. To
Joe or
be-
Kevin,
to be
have you
made
guys
safe.
ever done maintenance on that?
Yes,
Okay.
Yep.
I don't know how often it's used.
it's inspected.
Yeah, it's part of the annual inspections that we do.
Okay.
Inspected annually?
Yep.
The elevator must be inspected annually as well, right?
Yep.
Well, the elevator is a state inspection.
So
I was just gonna ask if the dumbwaiter had any sort of authority, having jurisdiction over it.
I don't think so.
Who inspects the dumbwaiter?
I know.
Mass Department of Public Safety. The same people that do the elevator, it's the state elevator inspector has jurisdiction over that.
So, should I change the note to inspected annually by state agency for both of these items?
Yes.
So the dumbwaiter sign may be a requirement of the state so that people are at least advised that it's not for passengers.
Right.
To avoid the attractive nuisance.
Coming down to the wire here. Notifier system, fire alarm system. Brad was all over the town hall.
I
by the way.
was. I don't usually comment this much. I
I
don't
love it.
remember.
I
I don't
love it,
remember
man.
this. I don't remember this particular one. So
I think you just, it was an open question about a building of this.
yeah.
This,
So there is no fire alarm in this building, right?
Oh, yes, there is.
Fire alarm, no sprinkler.
No sprinkler system.
Yeah. So this is a NA rating. Maybe that's what triggered this. There's no rating on this, but it exists.
Yeah, and we put an addressable panel in that building in 2013.
Is that the notifier system?
Yep.
So,
So.
So you can put notifier system installed in 2013.
2000, what was it, 16?
13.
13. System is inspected annually?
It's a third, and a third, yes. So yeah, basically, yes.
By local fire department?
It's
Our alarm company.
local,
Okay.
and the fire department does a yearly inspection of it also, yes.
We'll leave it with inspected annually.
There you go.
We give this a 4? I'll open the bidding at a 4.
Well, 2013 isn't that old. Maybe it's even better.
Well, that's not the full system, right? Was the notifier system the name of it, or is that just one aspect of it?
It has a new panel and new devices throughout the entire building.
I'd say 5.
I agree.
Yeah, I'd say a 4 or a 5. You can't, with an addressable system, you can't mix and match pieces and parts. So it all would have had to have been new.
Right.
And where they do annual testing with a third of the devices, you're pretty much assured that the system's in good shape every year.
Okay. I'm gonna change this. The fire protection, just a note, there's no fire protection sprinkler system in the building, but I'm gonna delete the recommend further action.
Yeah.
Right.
Kind of how we handle all the schools.
Yep.
Is there lightning protection? We have an NA on it.
No, there is not.
Okay. With Nancy's big yawn,
I know. I'm getting to the end there.
I caught you. So I think we're good with this. Couple, or at least maybe one item that's left still open. I don't think we got everything. I'll change all these comments. I'll just change the font of those.
Yep.
And we'll have a one final chance to look at it next month, and then we'll move on to whatever's next, which I think is the DPW.
Right.
So I think that's it. We're good for the meeting.
Time for scallops.
Else anyone has any new business?
Martini.
Martini, that's better.
Just a question or a comment. I left off almost a year ago when you guys had somewhat of a plan of how to proceed through the buildings and especially how to go through the public process. Just let me know what you want to do and let me know how to help. So I know a lot of things have changed.
Yeah, I think the big question is, so we've toured all of the major town buildings. Note the word major. We toured the cemetery building. That was a long time ago. Materis cabin and some things like that. So we've toured them all. We've created notes and we've gone back through just about all of them. The only 2 we have left to go through is the DPW and the library. And then we could turn our attention towards creating a report similar to the report we did for the schools.
Okay.
So we could probably potentially have that for town meeting in April. That might be pushing it because it's only 3 meetings between now and then.
Yeah, I'd probably want to shove you out another town meeting only because if April is Zoom again, the moderator is going to require you to submit reports in writing only.
Okay.
And your reports are easily already in writing, but I think the benefit would be for you folks to give a nice summary like you did to the school committee.
Yeah.
So, you can come in to see the select board whenever you want.
Got it.
And then maybe next November town meeting.
Yeah. We've got nothing else to do.
By then we should be in person, knock on wood.
Pat, did we clarify that we need to go to Matera Cabin or some of these other smaller buildings? Is that what we're planning to do, or?
Thank you, Nancy. That was the first part of my statement there. Yeah. Lost my train of thought. So that's one of the questions we have, Bob. Where do we end with, what's the intent?
is the intent of the bylaw and the charge of the PVC that was something like physical inventory of the town facilities. Where does that stop and start in?
I would have given you a different answer 7 or 10 years ago, but right now I'd say any building that has funds that the facilities department receives to keep maintenance. So Matera cabin's a yes.
Yeah.
Cemetery garage is a yes. They used to not be maintained by facilities.
So while we're all here, the two that we don't have on our list are the Matera cabin and cemetery. Are there any other town buildings, there's pump stations or whatever that I don't think would count, but are there any of the town buildings that we would consider should be part of this?
I don't think so, because the other facilities I can think of, maintenance might exist by DPW, either water, sewer, or just DPW, but not by facilities. So it's not a building in the traditional sense.
What about you, Joe? Can you think of anything? I feel like there was one more that I'm missing.
The only other one is the Lion's Den, or the over here on the high school property that you didn't look at, which is just a small, basically a garage, but it's a building. It's a separate building from the main complex here, so that would be very easy to do and add under the high school.
What did you refer to that as, the Lions building?
The Lion's Den.
Okay, Lions Den. Even
Snack
better.
Shack.
Oh, Snack Shack. Got it. All right. Okay. So we'll plan to add those.
Can we do that
got
one
a couple
after
more
a game or
checklists to
during
go
a game,
to.
just to make sure we get a sample of the wares that are coming out of?
You might be waiting a while.
Yeah, if we start having games again, we can.
Yeah.
So we could do scallops tonight, and then sometime in the future. We can check.
So we'll have to figure out how to tour those buildings. I would recommend face masks, socially distant, smaller group, and kind of let everyone think about that. And if anyone doesn't feel comfortable, obviously, it's a simple hard no. I don't want to do that.
I think, Pat, that we might be able to wait until the weather gets a little bit better. If we're not going to be on the agenda until November, that gives us to the spring and maybe early summer to do those two buildings. So that might be helpful. Better weather.
Yeah. And mentally, I'm tabling it like at least 2 more months to go through the DPW and the library. Right. So that's January, February. So yeah, I agree 100%.
Yeah.
Go to table those for late spring.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Anyone? New business? Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And re-adjourning at John's house for martinis and scallops.
Be right over, John.
So John, what do you got? You got some white wine, some scallops.
Enjoy it.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.